Welcome to Starbound. My name's the Voice Ogre, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new stories of Sunspire Academy, which I happen to do, and Freyrin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. The zero-G stasis field made Caleb feel like a bug in amber. Except amber didn't make your teeth itch, and your inner ear stage a full rebellion against the concept of up. He floated in the center of the Dakar Polytechnic Xenobiology Amphitheater. Arms spread like some discount messiah, while 300 alien students gawked at the massive holographic display of his internal organs rotating above him. Fascinating, Professor Glorp's synthesizer chirped through its encounter suit speakers. The Viridian's gelatinous form pulsed with a disturbing shade of mauve, a color Caleb now recognized as academic excitement. Its mechanical pincer traced the hologram's cardiovascular system with the enthusiasm of a kid showing off their new toy. The primary aortic pump is perfectly clear, but the schematics show no redundant circulatory pump. Student Caleb, where is the backup heart? A murmur rippled through the amphitheater. Several Cathar students' ear tufts flattened, their species equivalent of a horrified gasp. A Zephyrate in the back row actually fainted, its consciousness redistributing across its 3 subsidiary brains in a defensive cascade. I don't have one, Caleb said, trying to keep the exhaustion out of his voice. This was the 3rd demonstration this week. Being the only human in an alien university was starting to feel less like an educational opportunity and more like being a carnival attraction. From the front row, Sariel scoffed. The Cathar prodigy's amber eyes narrowed to slits, her sleek fur rippling with the subtle tremor of disdain. Preposterous, she said, her voice carrying the kind of academic certainty that could make 2 + 2 = 5 if it had enough citations. A single-point failure system for the primary circulatory network that violates every principle of robust biological design. And yet, Glorp burbled happily, here he is, functional, mobile, exhibiting what appears to be mild annoyance. The professor's 3 distributed brains flickered in sequence, its version of a delighted giggle. Perhaps we should examine the skeletal system next. I am particularly curious about the load-bearing capacity of those singular femurs. Caleb suppressed a groan. His scholarship to Dakar Polytechnic had seemed like a dream opportunity 6 months ago. Study xenobiology with the galaxy's finest minds. Experience the wonders of interstellar civilization. What the recruiting materials hadn't mentioned was that he'd spent most of the time being poked, prodded, and scanned, while aliens made increasingly horrified noises about his suboptimal biological architecture. The stasis field released him with a sound like reality hiccuping. Caleb's feet hit the floor harder than he'd intended. Earth normal muscle memory and concordant standard gravity always made him look like he was trying to stomp through the deck plating. Thank you, Student Caleb, for another illuminating demonstration, Glorp said, its suit's mechanical hands performing something that might have been applause if the Viridian had ever figured out the appropriate number of claps. It usually stopped short. Class dismissed. Remember, your comparative analysis of redundant organ systems across 20 species is due next rotation. I expect thorough documentation of backup mechanisms. As the amphitheater emptied, Caleb caught Sariel staring at the lingering hologram of his organs. The expression was the same one she wore when encountering a particularly offensive mathematical proof, like reality itself had personally insulted her. He grabbed his bag and headed for the door, already dreading tomorrow's Biological Anomalies and Sapient Species seminar. At least that one didn't require him to strip down to medical scanners. Human. Caleb turned. Sariel stood by the hologram controls. Her fur immaculate as always, every strand aligned in a flawless geometric arrangement. Cathar didn't just groom, they optimized. Yeah? Your hepatic system. She gestured at the display. It shows signs of regenerative capability. A liver? Yeah, it can grow back if you damage it. Takes a while, though. Her ear tufts twitched. Disgust or fascination, Caleb couldn't tell. With Cathar, the line between the two was gossamer thin. Regeneration without dedicated backup organs. Survival through redundant cellular function rather than redundant structure. She said it like she was tasting something bitter. Chaotic. Still alive, though, Caleb pointed out. A statistical anomaly. Sariel's pupils contracted to pinpoints. For centuries, every respectable biologist has concluded that a species like yours is a biological impossibility. A spacer's myth. A single heart? A respiratory system that shares infrastructure with your digestive tract. It violates every principle of robust biological design. She shuddered, her fur standing on end. How your species even exists, let alone achieved spaceflight, that is beyond comprehension. Caleb shrugged. We're stubborn, I guess. Stubbornness is not a survival trait. Well, it depends on what you're trying to survive. She stared at him for a long moment, her photographic memory probably cataloging every one of his suboptimal biological features for future reference. Then, she turned on her heel and stalked out, her tail lashing with frustration. Caleb watched her go, then glanced back at the holograms of his organs still spinning in the air. Single heart, single spine, no backup systems, just meat and bone and stubbornness, held together by duct tape and spite, as his grandfather used to say. He killed the display and headed back to his dorm, already looking forward to his evening ritual, a bootleg collection of old Earth survival shows he'd smuggled onto his datapad. Last night, he'd watched some Australian guy explain how to make a fire with nothing but sticks and optimism. Completely useless information on a space station where the temperature was regulated to the third decimal place, and the emergency procedures for fire started with seal the compartment and vent to outside. The shuttle ride to Viridia for the class field excursion took 6 hours, during which Sariel, seated nearby, had taken his presence as a personal challenge, occasionally muttering about single points of failure while referencing schematics on her datapad. Caleb tuned her out, watching the planet grow larger and larger through the viewport. He knew the purpose of the trip. As Professor Glorp had declared it, a delightful opportunity to observe parallel evolutionary solutions in a controlled death world environment. The shuttle lurched. Not dramatically. Not the kind of teeth-rattling turbulence that meant something had gone wrong. Just a tiny hiccup in the inertial dampeners, so slight that most of the students didn't even notice. But Caleb had grown up on Earth, where technology was held together by hope and expired warranties. He knew the sound of a system having a momentary existential crisis. "Did you feel that?" he asked. Sariel glanced up from her datapad. "Feel what?" "That little—" The ship lurched again, harder this time. The lights flickered for exactly 0.003 seconds. "Atmospheric interference," the pilot announced with the kind of aggressive cheerfulness that meant, please don't panic. "Perfectly normal when transiting the magnetosphere during the elevated stellar activity. We'll be through in just..." The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, bathing everything in a sick green glow that made everyone look like they had food poisoning. The shuttle's engine note had changed, dropping from a smooth hum to something that sounded distinctly unhappy about its life choices. "Minor technical difficulty." The pilot's cheerfulness had sharp edges now. "Backup systems engaging. We'll have primary power restored momentarily." Caleb checked his suit's diagnostics. Still green across the board, but he noticed something odd. The timestamp had glitched for a second, showing a date 3,000 years in the future before correcting itself. "Temporal desynchronization in the navigation computer," Sariel observed, her voice clinical. The stellar radiation is interfering with the chronosynclastic relays. It's fascinating. The failure cascade should follow a predictable... The shuttle dropped like a stone for exactly 1 second before the pilot got it under control. Someone screamed. It might have been Glorp. "Attention, students!" The pilot had abandoned cheerfulness entirely. "We are initiating emergency landing procedures. Please remain calm and..." The rest was lost in the sound of every alarm on the shuttle deciding to have a conversation at maximum volume. The landing was less controlled descent and more aggressive negotiation with gravity. The shuttle hit the ground like a drunk uncle sitting down too fast, sending everyone tumbling in their restraints. Caleb's teeth clicked together hard enough to make his skull ring.
Everyone alive?
Glorp's synthesizer warbled through different audio codecs before setting on something resembling speech.
Sound off. We use whatever passes for affirmative in your species.
A chorus of responses ranging from clicks to ultrasonic squeals filled the cabin. Caleb added his own, "Yeah, still breathing," into the mix.
Excellent. No educational casualties.
Glorp somehow made this sound like a personal achievement.
The pilot informs me that we've landed approximately 12 kilometers from the designated research station. A minor inconvenience. We'll simply trek through the preserve and...
"Professor." Sariel's voice cut through the babble like a scalpel through tissue paper. She was staring at her datapad, her fur standing on end. "I'm not detecting the suppression field." After her words, the only sound was the hiss of a damaged life support line.
But that's impossible.
Glorp's 3 brains flickered in sequence, the Viridian equivalent of a nervous breakdown.
Check again. Wait, the field operates on multiple redundant...
"I have checked 19 times in the last 4 seconds, Sariel said. "The subsonic wave is absent. The grid is down." Through the shuttle's viewports, Caleb could see the Viridia landscape. Rolling hills covered in vegetation that looked like someone had crossbred grass with steel wool. Strange, twisted trees that grew in perfect spirals. And in the distance, something large moved through the underbrush with a hunter's grace. "Okay," Caleb said slowly. "Nobody panic. We've got suits, we've got emergency beacons, and we've got..." A sound like 10,000 tuning forks having a bad day split the air. Every piece of electronic equipment in the shuttle screamed. It sparked and died. Caleb's suit display flickered and went dark. The emergency lights gave off one last valiant effort before joining the electronic graveyard. In the sudden darkness, lit only by the angry orange sun streaming through the viewports, Caleb heard Professor Glorp's synthesizer make a sound he'd never heard before. It was the sound of a very intelligent being realizing it had made a very stupid mistake.
Class,
Glorp said quietly.
I believe that we should discuss contingency planning.
Outside, something roared. It was not a docile sound. Panic was a universal language, even if it had different accents. The chitin clicked anxiously while Professor Glorp's encounter suit made distressed clicking noises. Caleb ignored them, tapping the dispenser panel on his suit. His nutrient dispenser made a grinding noise like a coffee machine choking on a sock, and died. Another casualty of the electromagnetic pulse. The emergency beacon on his wrist was also dead, though at least it was honest about it. The display showed a crisp, clear null where its location should be.
The nearest predator is Corodax noctis,
a chitin student chimed, his obsidian structure vibrating at the exact frequency of barely controlled terror.
Apex pursuit predator, capable of maintaining speeds of 60 kilometers per hour for extended periods. Infrared vision, redundant cardiovascular system with 3 hearts. Thank you, Student Frex,
Glorp interrupted.
Perhaps we should focus on immediate survival rather than cataloging the various ways we might become educational casualties.
Caleb glanced at Sariel. She was studying her own suit's display, which was somehow still humming with perfect functionality. You getting any readings? My equipment is functioning perfectly, she said, not looking up. Unlike yours, it was designed with proper redundancies. Her finger tapped and swiped across the interface. I'm detecting elevated electromagnetic interference consistent with a Class 7 stellar event. The suppression grid's power management systems were likely overwhelmed by the surge. How long until it comes back online? Unknown. The system should auto-reset within... She paused, her ear tufts flattening. 18 to 36 hours.
Great!
Caleb looked around the alien landscape, the orange sun painting everything in shades of rust and blood. In the distance, those spiral trees swayed without any wind.
So we just need to survive a day and a half on a death world with no tech and no...
The ground shook. Not earthquake shook. Something very large moving shook. Everyone froze. Even Glorp's perpetual academic enthusiasm dimmed to a worried purple. Over the nearest hill, shapes appeared. Hundreds of them. Creatures that looked like someone had tried to design a cow, but had gotten the scale wrong by an order of magnitude. They moved in perfect synchronization, their footfalls creating a rhythm that made Jaleb's jaw clench.
Mega grazers.
Glorp's synthesizer whispered.
Docile herbivores under normal circumstances, but without the suppression field.
The lead creature raised its head. 3 eyes, each the size of dinner plates, fixed on the cluster of students. It made a sound like a foghorn having an anxiety attack. The herd charged.
Move!
Caleb shouted, but the aliens were already freezing up. Cathar didn't have adrenaline. Sariel stood perfectly still, her photographic memory probably cataloging every detail of her impending doom. The chitin's obsidian bodies locked into defensive positions that would be very impressive if several tons of panicked herbivore gave a damn about geometry. The human endocrine system, on the other hand, had opinions about standing still when death approached at 40 miles an hour. Caleb's adrenal glands dumped their entire inventory into his bloodstream. Time stretched like taffy. His single, supposedly inferior heart kicked into overdrive, pushing oxygen to muscles that suddenly felt like coiled springs. He grabbed the nearest student, a small Zephyrid who weighed maybe 30 pounds, and dove sideways. The herd thundered past, close enough that he could smell the sharp scent of static and methane from their breath. The ground where he'd been standing became a moonscape of massive hoofprints. But the real problem wasn't the grazers. They were just running. The real problem was what they were running from. As the dust settled, Caleb saw them. Korodak's pack hunters, moving through the chaos with terrible grace. They flowed like liquid shadow, using the grazer stampede as cover. And one of them noticed the cluster of students. It smiled. Korodak's had too many teeth for smiling to be anything but a threat.
Professor,
Caleb said quietly,
we need to move now.
Glorp's 3 brains couldn't seem to agree on a response. The suit made a sound like a computer trying to divide by 0.
There!
One of the chitin pointed with an obsidian appendage.
Defensive position! Elevated ground! Natural barriers!
They were indicating a cave halfway up a nearby hill. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than standing in the open like a buffet advertisement.
Go, Caleb said. Everyone move, now!
Nobody moved. The aliens were still locked in analysis paralysis, their big brains calculating odds instead of listening to the older, simpler part that screamed, run. The Korodaks took a step closer, then another.
Move your asses or become thinner!
Caleb roared, putting every ounce of drill sergeant authority he'd learned from old Earth war movies into his voice. That worked. 20 aliens suddenly remembered they had legs, and started scrambling toward the cave. Caleb brought up the rear, keeping himself between the predators and the slowest students. His grandfather would have been proud. Also probably confused about the aliens, but mostly proud. They made it to the cave. Barely. Caleb shoved the last chitin inside, just as the first Korodax reached the bottom of the hill. It tested the slope, decided the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and settled down to wait. Because of course it did. Persistence predators. They didn't need to be fast, they just needed to be patient. "Well?" Caleb said, breathing hard. His suit's biometrics would have been having a fit if they were still working.
The good news is, we are not dead. Okay. Bad news is that we're trapped in a cave on a death world with no tech and no rescue for at least 18 hours. Does anyone pack snacks?
By hour 3, panic had settled into a low hum of academic debate and despair. The other students huddled together, while Professor Glorp, apparently emerging from his funk, was muttering about the statistical improbability of their situation. Caleb turned his attention to more practical matters. His nutrient dispenser was definitely dead, and without it, he had maybe 8 hours before his hyperactive human metabolism started eating itself. Water was less of a problem. The cave had a small trickle running down one wall. Probably groundwater seepage. He tested it with his suit's basic chemical sensor before it died. High mineral content, but nothing immediately toxic. The other students were eyeing it suspiciously, their species' various hang-ups about contamination warring with basic thirst.
"Water's safe," he announced. "Probably tastes like licking a battery, but it won't kill you."
"How could you be certain?" Sariel challenged. Her fur was still matted with dust, making her look less like an apex academic and more like someone who'd lost a fight with a vacuum cleaner. "Your suit's sensors are non-functional."
"Because I already drank some."
Caleb lied smoothly. He had, but only after the sensor check. No point in explaining that to the paranoid.
"See? Not dead."
A chitin made a sound like wind chimes in a blender.
"The human's biochemistry is notoriously robust. What merely discomforts them might dissolve our internal structures."
"Fair point." Caleb shrugged. "I guess you just have to decide if you want to trust the water or trust dehydration."
Outside, something roared. The Korodax were getting impatient, or hungry, or both.
"They're testing our defenses,"
one of the Zephrids observed, its hovering form pulsing with anxiety.
"Korodax hunting patterns indicate that they probe for weakness before committing to an assault."
Fascinating.
Glorp said flatly.
Perhaps I should take notes for my inevitable posthumous paper on catastrophic field studies.
The sun was setting, painting the cave mouth in shades of dried blood. Caleb did a mental inventory. 20 scarred aliens, 1 depressed professor, no working tech, no food for him, limited water, and an unknown number of apex predators playing the waiting game outside. Could be worse. Could be raining. As if the universe had heard him, thunder rumbled in the distance.
"Oh, come on,"
Caleb muttered. "Fluidia's weather patterns," Sariel said, because apparently even facing death couldn't stop her from lecturing, "are notoriously unstable during stellar events. The electromagnetic interference disrupts atmospheric."
"It's gonna rain," Caleb interrupted. "Hard. The cave mouth faces upward, so we're gonna flood."
Everyone turned to stare at the entrance. Sure enough, the angle would funnel the water directly inside. The tiny trickle on the wall would become a torrent.
"We need to block it," Caleb said. "Rocks, debris, anything. We need to build a barrier, or we swim."
The Korodax,
someone started.
"Are not fans of rain either," Caleb pointed out. "Infrared hunters don't do well when everything's the same temperature. This is our chance to fortify."
He expected argument, debate, academic analysis of optimal barrier construction. Instead, Sariel stood. The human is correct. Chitin, your obsidian structure will make you ideal for moving heavy objects. Zephyrids, your distributed consciousness can coordinate multiple work streams. Everyone else, follow my lead. Caleb blinked. You're agreeing with me? I'm agreeing with physics. She corrected, already moving toward the cave mouth. Water flows downhill. Even your species understands that. Under Sariel's ruthless efficiency direction and Caleb's practical experience, thank you, emergency shelter construction videos, they built a crude but functional barrier. The chitin formed a living scaffolding, allowing the smaller students to place rocks in higher positions. The Zephyrids coordinated like air traffic controllers, preventing collisions and optimizing placement. The Kordax watched from a safe distance, probably confused by prey that was doing construction work instead of cowering. The first raindrops hit just as they placed the last stone. Within minutes, it was a deluge. Water cascaded down the hillside, hit the barrier, and flowed around the cave instead of into it. Not perfect. Some still seeped through, but manageable. Acceptable, Sariel pronounced, which from her was practically a parade. Caleb slumped against the wall, exhaustion hitting like a sledgehammer. His suit's chronometer was dead, but his body knew he'd been running on adrenaline and stubbornness for too long, and the lack of food wasn't helping. Your metabolic indicators, Sariel said quietly, sitting beside him. The suit's passive display suggests significant caloric deficit. I'm fine. Your nutrient dispenser failed. Yeah, I noticed. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain and the occasional frustrated growl from outside. By hour 6, the rain had stopped, but the problems were multiplying like rabbits with engineering degrees. 2 of the chitin were showing stress fractures in their obsidian structure. The Zephyrids' distributed consciousness was starting to desynchronize, leaving them literally scatterbrained. And one of the younger students, a mollusk whose name Caleb couldn't pronounce, had gone into shock, her chromophores flashing random distress patterns. Caleb knelt beside the mollusk, trying to remember the first aid course he'd taken. Alien physiology was complex, but trauma was trauma. Keep her warm, keep her stable, keep her talking. Hey, he said gently. What's your name? The short version, because my human vocal cords are pretty basic. She managed, her translucent body pulsing with anxiety. I want to go home. Yeah, me too. Tell me about home. What's it like? As Blue described her aquatic homeworld, Caleb carefully checked her injuries. Nothing broken, just shock and fear. He grabbed his emergency blanket, one of the few pieces of kit that still worked because it was basically just fancy aluminum foil, and wrapped it around her.
The human is performing medical treatment,
Glorp observed, apparently emerging from its funk.
despite having no formal xenobiological medical training.
It's not treatment, Caleb said. It's just being decent. She's scared and cold. Anyone would do this. Incorrect, Sariel said from across the cave. Most concordant species would prioritize their own survival. Altruism toward other species is considered a luxury resource allocation. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And yet, statistically accurate. She was studying him with that intense focus again. Your species' pack bonding instincts appear to be non-species specific. Fascinating. Illogical, but fascinating. A crack of breaking stone interrupted their philosophical debate. Part of their barrier had shifted, creating a gap big enough for something unpleasant to squeeze through.
I'll fix it.
Caleb started to stand, but his vision grayed at the edges. Right. No food for 6 hours plus constant adrenaline equals bad times. He sat back down harder than intended. You're experiencing metabolic crash, Sariel observed. Predictable given your species' inefficient energy storage systems.
Thank you for the diagnosis, Doc. You have any solutions?
She held out a small cylinder.
Emergency glucose supplement. My species doesn't require it, but regulations mandate universal compatibility. Caleb stared at the offering. Why? Because if you collapse, we lose our most functional crisis responder. She thrust the cylinder at him. This is purely practical resource allocation. He took it, popped the seal, and downed the contents. It tasted like someone had dissolved cotton candy in battery acid, but he could feel his cells doing a happy dance as the sugar hit his bloodstream. Thanks. Fix the barrier, she ordered, already turning away. Your opposable thumbs are more suited to the task than our appendages. Caleb smiled despite himself and got to work. The repair took 20 minutes and most of their remaining loose stones, but it held. When he turned back, he found the entire cave watching him. What? You did not optimize the repair for minimal resource expenditure, a chitin observed. You reinforced beyond necessary parameters. Yeah, well, I'd rather over-engineer than wake up with a Corodax chewing on my face, huh? But the energy expenditure will keep us alive. Caleb interrupted. Sometimes good enough isn't. The chitin fell silent, their obsidian structure humming with what might have been contemplation. Outside, something screamed. Not a hunting call. This was different. Pain or fear or both. The Corodax had found other prey, or perhaps found something that considered them prey. The ecosystem was waking up, and it was hungry. Professor, Caleb said, I need information about the local predators. Not the optimal hunting patterns or evolutionary history. I need practical stuff. What do they hate? What scares them? What makes them decide that we're not worth the effort? Glorp's 3 brains flickered in sequence.
Such information isn't typically catalogued in academic.
I know this, Sariel interrupted. Not academically. I accessed recreational materials about Viridia. Adventure documentaries. Technically forbidden for students, but... You watched illegal nature shows? Caleb couldn't hide his grin. The perfect student breaks the rules. Her fur bristled. I was researching for context. The documentary mentioned the Corodax dislike fire and bright lights. Their infrared vision makes sudden temperature changes very painful. Fire. Caleb looked around the cave. All right. Anyone got anything flammable? 20 aliens stared at him like he'd suggested they set themselves on fire. Which, from their perspective, he kind of had.
Fire is dangerous, Glorp ventured. Uncontrolled combustion in an enclosed space would...
Is better than controlled digestion in a Corodax stomach, Caleb finished. Look, I'm not talking about a bonfire, just something at the entrance, something to make them think twice.
The emergency kit,
Blue spoke up, still wrapped in the blanket.
It has flares. Chemical combustion sticks for signaling.
Caleb could have kissed her, if he knew which end was which. Perfect, how many?
6, Glorp said. Standard emergency allocation.
6 flares, 20 scared students, unknown number of predators. Caleb had worked with worse odds. Probably. He couldn't actually remember when, but surely he had. Okay, he said. So here's what we're going to do. The first Corodax appeared at the cave mouth just as Viridia's angry orange sun began to set for the second time. It moved like oil poured over glass, 6 legs carrying it with disturbing grace. The infrared pits on its skull swiveled, tracking heat signatures through stone and flesh. Caleb lit the first flare. The chemical combustion stick erupted in actinic white fire, throwing harsh shadows across the cave walls. The Corodax recoiled, a sound like grinding metal escaping its throat. Its infrared vision, perfectly adapted for tracking warm prey in cool darkness, was suddenly staring into a miniature sun.
It's working,
someone whispered. For now, Caleb muttered. The flare would burn for maybe 5 minutes. They had 5 more. 30 minutes of protection, maximum. The Corodax retreated, but didn't go far. He could see its outline against the dying light. waiting. Others joined in. 3, 5, 8.
They're pack hunters, Sariel said unnecessarily. They'll coordinate, test our defenses one by one. I know. The flares are a temporary solution. I know. We need a better plan. I know!
Caleb took a breath. Snapping at the person who actually gave him food wouldn't help.
Sorry, I'm open to suggestions. I have been analyzing their behavior, she said, moving to stand beside him. They're not just waiting, they're conserving energy, minimizing caloric expenditure while maximizing pressure on prey.
Persistence predators. Yeah, I can afford to wait us out.
Yes, but...
She paused, her photographic memory clearly rifling through files.
Professor Glorp mentioned something about their cardiovascular system.
From across the cave, Glorp perked up.
Oh, yes. Magnificent redundancy. 3 hearts working in parallel, optimized for sustained aerobic activity. Unlike certain species with their single points of failure.
And caught itself.
No offense intended, Student Caleb.
None taken. Just tell me more about the 3 hearts.
Well?
Glorp shifted into lecture mode, apparently forgetting their imminent doom.
It's really quite elegant. The primary heart handles baseline circulation. The secondary activates during extended pursuit, allowing them to maintain speed without lactate buildup. The tertiary is specifically for temperature regulation during...
Wait, Caleb held up a hand. They have a heart just for cooling?
In essence, yes. Viridia's climate can be quite warm, and pursuit predation generates significant metabolic heat, right? So, the third heart pumps coolant-rich blood into specialized heat dissipation organs.
So they're built for marathons and not sprints.
I suppose that is one interpretation, although it vastly oversimplifies the elegant biochemical...
Can they sprint? Caleb interrupted. Short bursts, maximum speed. Glorp's brain flickered uncertainly.
Theoretically, their muscle fiber composition suggests some anaerobic capacity, but it would be tremendously inefficient. The metabolic cost would be...
High. Caleb finished. Very high. And with that specialized cooling system, well, they'd overheat fast if they pushed too hard.
Where are you going with this?
Sariel asked. Caleb looked at the burning flare, then at the Koradak silhouettes, then at the landscape beyond. In the dying light, he could see terrain features, rocky outcroppings, a ravine, and there, a scree slope. Loose rocks piled at an angle that would be hell to climb at speed.
I'm gonna do something very stupid, he said. That's not a plan, Sariel interjected. That's a character assessment.
No, it's definitely a plan. It's just a very, very stupid one. He turned to face the group. I need everyone to listen carefully. When I run out of this cave, the Koradaks are going to chase me. They will commit everything to catching me because humans are apparently the galaxy's most illogical prey, and they won't be able to resist.
You'll die,
Blue said quietly. Maybe. Probably. But while they're chasing me, I want the rest of you to run in the opposite direction. Get to higher ground. Find somewhere defensible. That rescue shuttle will come eventually.
This is suicide,
Sariel said flatly.
And more importantly, it's mathematically unsound. 1 life for 20 is acceptable in theory. But you're our only functional crisis responder. Without you...
You'll manage. You're brilliant, remember? Top of every class. You'll figure it out. Her ear tufts flattened.
Intelligence and practical application are not synonymous, as this entire situation demonstrates.
Well, then consider it a learning experience. Caleb checked the flare. 2 minutes left. Look, we can debate optimization algorithms, or we can use the fact that I've got 1 heart, no backup systems, and a metabolism that makes these hunters look at me like I'm made of pure energy. They will chase me because I am everything their instincts say is perfect prey. Hot, fast, and stupid enough to run.
The scree slope, Sariel said suddenly. You're not just running, you're leading them to unstable terrain. Give the genius a prize.
But they're heavier than you. Faster over distance, but less agile. On loose rock, at high speeds. Her pupils dilated as she ran the calculations. It could work. If you can maintain enough initial velocity to force them into anaerobic metabolism, and if the slope is unstable enough, if you don't die from exhaustion first, then... A lot of ifs. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Take this. She handed him another glucose cylinder, then another. 3 total. That's your entire emergency supply. As previously established, I am more metabolically efficient than you. She wouldn't meet his eyes. This is purely practical. If you're going to attempt something stupid, you might as well have the energy to be thoroughly stupid. Caleb pocketed the cylinders. Thanks. I will include that in my academic review. Her voice was odd, tight. Don't die. It would complicate my thesis on human biological inefficiencies. Wouldn't dream of it. The flare sputtered. 30 seconds left. All right, everyone ready? Caleb called out. When I go, count to 10, then move. Fast and quiet. Professor, do you know where the emergency shelter is?
12 kilometers northeast.
Glorp confirmed.
But student Caleb, I really must protest.
Protest later. Survive now. Caleb lit the second flare, holding it like a torch. Hey, Sariel, one more thing. What? Humans aren't designed wrong. We're just designed different. Sometimes one heart is enough if it's stubborn enough to keep beating. He didn't wait for her response. The flare held high, Caleb sprinted out of the cave, screaming at the top of his lungs. The Korodax, faced with prey that was literally running at them while on fire, from their perspective, did exactly what millions of years of evolution hadn't prepared them for. They hesitated. It was only for a second, but a second was all Caleb needed. He juked left, then right, then straight between the two of them. The heat of the flare made their infrared vision useless. All they could see was a blob of white-hot insanity sprinting into the darkness. Then, instinct kicked in, and the chase was on. The thing about running for your life was that it was nothing like in the movies. There was no soundtrack, no dramatic slow motion, no convenient plot armor. There was just the burn in your lungs, the taste of copper in your mouth, and the sound of way too many legs hitting the ground behind you. Caleb's single heart was doing its best impression of a machine gun. His supposedly inferior human metabolism was burning through glucose like a fighter jet burning through fuel. Every breath felt like inhaling fire, and his legs were already screaming protests about this whole maximum sprint business. But he was fast. Stupidly, unsustainably fast. The Korodax hadn't expected that. They were built for the long hunt, for wearing down prey over hours or days. But humans, well, humans were persistence hunters too. Just weird ones. They could sprint when they needed to, pushing their systems into the red zone that sensible species avoided. The flare was dead weight now, but Caleb held on to it. The Korodax were tracking by heat as much as sight, and the still-warm chemical stick was like a beacon. He needed them focused on him, not wondering where the other snacks had gone. The scree slopes loomed ahead, a 40-degree angle of loose rock and dubious stability. In daylight, with proper equipment, it would be tricky. At night, while being chased by apex predators, it was insane. Perfect. Caleb hit the slope at full speed, his lighter weight and bipedal gait letting him dance across the loose stones. Behind him, the lead Korodax tried to match his pace. Physics had opinions about 400 kilograms of predator hitting unstable terrain at 30 miles an hour. The first rock slide was small, just a few stones tumbling down. But the Korodax's weight and six-legged gait worked against it. Each foot placement disturbed more rocks, creating a cascade effect. It tried to slow down, but momentum was a harsh mistress. The second Korodax, following close behind, couldn't stop it in time. It slammed into the first, and suddenly Caleb had two predators playing a very dangerous game of Jenga with gravity. He reached the top of the slope, legs screaming, lungs on fire. Time for phase 2 of his very stupid plan. The emergency glucose cylinders went down like shots of liquid lightning. His cells, starved for energy, absorbed the sugar with embarrassing eagerness. It wasn't sustainable. He was basically feeding a fire with gasoline, but he didn't need sustainable. He just needed 5 more minutes. 3 Coridacs had made it around the slope, taking the longer but more stable route. They were closing in, their efficient cardiovascular systems finally coming into play. But Caleb spotted his next target, a ravine, maybe 6 meters across. For a human in decent shape, it was jumpable. Barely, probably. For a Coridax built for endurance over agility. Caleb didn't slow down. Slowing meant thinking, and thinking meant realizing how monumentally stupid this was. He hit the edge of the ravine at full speed and jumped. For one terrifying moment, he was flying, then falling, then hitting the other side with the grace of a sack of potatoes being thrown by someone who hated potatoes. He rolled, came up running, and looked back just in time to see the lead Coridax try to make the jump. It didn't. The sound it made going down was somewhere between a roar and a philosophical question about life choices. The other 2 predators skidded to a stop at the ravine's edge, their infrared pits swiveling as they searched for another route. Caleb kept running, but he could feel his body starting to rebel. The glucose was burning off too fast. His muscles were switching to anaerobic metabolism, building up lactate that felt like acid in his veins. His single heart was starting to skip beats, protesting the abuse. But he'd done it. The Coridax pack was scattered, confused, half of them probably still dealing with sprains or bruises. They'd regroup eventually, but not tonight. And 20 aliens were hopefully halfway to safety by now. Caleb slowed to a jog, then a walk, then collapsed against a twisted tree that smelled like antiseptic and old socks. His vision was doing interesting things, like showing him colors that definitely didn't exist.
Okay,
He wheezed to himself.
good news is, I'm not dead. Bad news, everything hurts and I might throw up. Overall rating, 6 out of 10. Would not recommend.
Something rustled in the underbrush. Caleb forced his head up, expecting to see another Coridax. Instead, he found himself face to face with what looked like a 6-legged rabbit crossed with a disco ball. The creature studied him with eyes that reflected the starlight in fractal patterns.
Hey,
Caleb said.
it's a nice night for a run, huh?
The disco rabbit tilted its head, made a sound like a theremin having an existential crisis, and hopped away.
Yep,
Caleb muttered.
that's fair.
He needed to move, find shelter, find water, find the others. But first, he needed 5 minutes to convince his body that they were still friends. His emergency beacon, still faithfully displaying null, at least had a working compass. Northeast, 12 kilometers. With a busted metabolism, no food, and probably half the predator population in Viridia holding a grudge.
I should have studied accounting,
He told the stars.
Nice, safe accounting. No aliens, no death worlds. Just numbers and coffee and a reasonable life expectancy.
The stars, unsympathetic to his career regrets, twinkled on. With a groan that came from the depths of his soul, Caleb pushed himself upright and started walking, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 heartbeat at a time. 12 kilometers. He could do this. Probably. By the time dawn broke over Viridia's twisted landscape, Caleb had revised his definition of tired several times. He'd passed through normal tired somewhere around kilometer 3, achieved transcendent exhaustion by kilometer 6, and was now operating in a state that could only be described as mobile corpse with opinions. The emergency shelter appeared through the morning haze like a mirage made of corporate safety standards. It was a prefab structure, all clean lines and regulation colors, sitting in a cleared area like someone had dropped a piece of civilization and forgotten to pick it up. More importantly, there were footprints leading to it. Lots of them. Different sizes and gaits that suggested his very stupid plan had actually worked. The door was locked, because of course it was. Emergency shelters were designed to keep dangerous wildlife out, and apparently that included humans who looked like they'd been put through a blender set to vindictive. Caleb knocked.
Hey, it's me. I'm the idiot who ran into the night. Someone want to let me in before I become one with the ground.
The door opened so fast he almost fell through it. Sariel stood there, her usually perfect fur matted and dusty, her amber eyes wide with something that might have been relief.
You're alive,
she said.
Disappointed?
Statistically, I'm surprised. She grabbed his arm, pulling him inside. Your survival probability was approximately 4%.
Well, I live to defy statistics.
The shelter was crowded, but intact. 20 aliens in various states of exhaustion, but alive. All of them, even Professor Glorp, whose encounter suit was making happy chirping noises.
Student Caleb!
Glorp oozed forward.
Your distraction was successful, although I must note it violated several safety regulations and all known principles of rational behavior.
Yeah, well,
Caleb slumped against the wall.
Humans are kind of known for that.
Someone pushed a water bottle into his hands. Blue, still wrapped in the emergency blanket, but looking much better.
The emergency supplies here are functional,
she said quietly.
Food, water, medical equipment.
Great.
Caleb drained half the bottle in one go.
Any word on rescue?
Communications are still compromised, Sariel reported. But the shelter's hardened system suggests the suppression grid will reset within the next 6 hours. Rescue procedures will initiate automatically once that occurs. 6 hours. Caleb could survive 6 hours. Probably. His body was already cataloging its various complaints. Torn muscle in his side, dehydration, metabolic crash, and something in his left knee that definitely wasn't supposed to be making that grinding noise. You require medical attention, Sariel observed.
I require pizza and about 3 days of sleep. But sure, medical attention works too.
She guided him to a bench, her movements unusually gentle. The shelter's medical kit was designed for multiple species, which meant it was either perfect for humans or would accidentally turn him purple. At that point, Caleb was too tired to care. Your biometrics, Sariel said, scanning him with a handheld device. Lactate levels elevated 400% above baseline. Muscle fiber damage in 19 locations. Cortisol and adrenaline depletion. How are you still conscious?
Spite, mostly.
She made a noise that must have been a laugh. Hold still. This will hurt. She wasn't lying. The tissue regenerator felt like someone was knitting his muscles back together with needles made of electricity. But afterward, the torn muscle in his side stopped screaming quite so loudly. Better? Yeah, thanks. Caleb watched her work, noting the specific, deliberate motions.
You got everyone here safely?
It was a simple logistical exercise once the primary threat was distracted. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Your plan was effective, if inadvisable. My plans usually are. Silence stretched between them. Around the shelter, the other students were settling in, exhaustion overcoming species-specific anxieties. The chitin had formed their defensive cluster in a corner. The Zephyrids hovered near the ceiling, their consciousness fully synchronized again. "I'm sorry," Sariel said suddenly. Caleb blinked. "What?" "My actions were petty, unworthy." She paused, searching for words. "I could not accept that a system with no redundancies could be viable. That you could be viable. My arrogance, my refusal to look past my own assumptions, it nearly got us all killed." "Yes." Her ear tufts flattened completely. "When we return, I will file a full confession with the academic board. Accept whatever punishment." "Don't." She looked up, startled. "What?" "Don't report it. We survived. Everyone's alive. Sometimes that's enough." "But the regulations, they require..." "Regulations also required the suppression grid to have 23 redundancies, and look how that worked out." Caleb leaned back, exhaustion making him philosophical. "You learned something. I learned something. Call it even." "What could you possibly have learned from this?" "That Cathar can improvise when they have to. That you're not just a big old brain with the fur attached. And that maybe, just maybe, the redundancy isn't always about having backup organs." She tilted her head. "Explain." "A Cordax. 3 hearts, built for endurance, perfect redundancy. But it made them predictable. They couldn't adapt when I did something outside of their parameters. But me? 1 heart, no backup, running on fumes and bad decisions. But I could change tactics, push past limits, and do the unexpected." "That's not redundancy, that's flexibility." "Same difference. Your backup systems are in your behavior, not your biology. Sometimes that's better." Sariel was quiet for a long moment. "You're suggesting that what I perceived as inferior design was actually optimization for a different parameter set?" "I'm just suggesting that there's probably more than one way to survive." Caleb closed his eyes. "But mostly I'm just suggesting that I need a nap before I start seeing colors that don't exist again." "Rest," she said. "I'll monitor the situation." "Thanks." "And, Sariel, next time you want to test a hypothesis about human biology, maybe just, ask. I mean, I'm pretty open about being a walking design failure." "You are not a failure," she said quietly. "You're just asymmetric." Caleb smiled without opening his eyes. "I'll take it." The rescue shuttle arrived 8 hours later, by which time the suppression grid had flickered back online, and every dangerous creature within 50 kilometers had suddenly remembered it preferred being docile. The ride back to Takar Polytechnic was subdued. 21 students and 1 professor, all processing their close encounter with natural selection. The pilot kept shooting glances at Caleb, probably wondering how the lone human looked like he'd gone 10 rounds with a meat grinder and lost. "Preliminary medical assessment," the shuttle's medic announced, hovering over Caleb with scanners. "Severe metabolic depletion, multiple muscle tears, stress fractures in the left patella, and... No, wait, this can't be right."
"What?"
Kloop leaned in, professionally concerned.
"The tissue with regeneration rate that shows 300% above baseline for any known species. The muscle tears are already partially healed. The metabolic indicators are stabilizing without intervention."
The medic shook his head, a gesture that looked odd on a being with no neck.
"This violates several principles of biological recovery."
"Welcome to being human," Caleb muttered. "We're full of violations."
"Remarkable!"
Glorp had recovered its academic enthusiasm.
"Natural tissue regeneration without dedicated healing organs. Now I must document this. Student Caleb, Would you consent to extended observation? Perhaps a series of controlled injuries just to measure.
Professor, Sariel interrupted, I believe student Caleb has contributed sufficient data to xenobiological studies for 1 semester. Glurp deflated slightly.
Yes, I suppose nearly dying does fulfill the practical experience requirements.
The rest of the flight passed in relative quiet. Caleb dozed, his traitorous single heart finally settling back to something approaching normal rhythm. Every so often, he'd catch Sariel watching him, her expression unreadable. Back at the Polytechnic, word had already spread. 20 species worth of students gathered to watch the shuttle disembark, all chittering in their various languages about how the Death World survivor made it. Caleb tried to slip away, but Glurp wasn't having it.
Students, gather round! A perfect teaching moment.
The professor's suit extended to maximum height.
We have experienced firsthand the importance of adaptive solutions versus optimal design. Student Caleb's survival strategy, while technically inadvisable, demonstrated the value of behavioral flexibility over structural redundancy.
Professor, Caleb groaned, please don't.
His single cardiovascular system, pushed beyond all rational limits, outperformed the triple redundant Corodax through sheer biological stubbornness. His metabolic inefficiencies became advantages when rapid energy expenditure was required. His absence of backup organs was compensated by decision-making that can only be described as aggressively creative.
The crowd murmured. Several students were taking notes. Someone in the back shouted,
But how does he not die from system failures?
An excellent question.
Glurp practically vibrated with excitement.
This will be the subject of my next research paper. Asymmetric survival strategies in suboptimal biological architectures. A case study in human persistence. Student Caleb has graciously agreed to co-author.
I have? Caleb asked.
You have now?
Glurp's 3 brains pulsed in synchrony.
Think of the citations, the conference presentations, the complete revolution in how we approach biological optimization theory.
Caleb caught Sariel's eye. She was definitely laughing, even if Cathar didn't technically have the facial muscles for it. Fine, he sighed, but I want my name spelled right. And no more lab demonstrations.
Agreed! This is most wonderful. We'll need to document everything. The chase trajectory, the metabolic calculations, the decision tree that led to jumping across a ravine while being pursued.
As Glorp continued planning their academic future, Caleb managed to finally escape. He made it halfway to his dormitory before Sariel caught up. You could have blamed me, she said without preamble. Told them my arrogance nearly got us all killed. It would have enhanced your survival narrative.
Could have, Caleb agreed. Didn't.
They walked in silence for a moment. The Polytechnic's halls were the same temperature-controlled, gravity-normalized perfection as always. It felt surreal after Viridio's chaotic hostility. I've been researching human biology, Sariel said eventually, beyond the obvious structural inefficiencies. Find anything interesting? Your species' approach to healing. It's not fast. Scar tissue is structurally inferior to original tissue, but it's pragmatic. You don't heal perfectly, but you do heal functionally. Story of our lives, really. Yes. She paused at the corridor junction. I believe I owe you a debt. In my culture, such debts must be repaid. You saved everyone after I ran off like an idiot, so you can call it even, right? Insufficient. I endangered lives through academic arrogance. You preserved them through... What did Professor Glorp call it? Aggressive creativity? Her amber eyes fixed on his. I want to learn. Learn what? How to think like you. How to see 19 impossible options and choose the 20th. How to function when optimal solutions aren't available. She hesitated. how to be asymmetric. Caleb grinned.
You want me to teach you how to be stupid?
I want you to teach me how to be flexibly intelligent.
It's the same thing, just fancier words.
He considered it.
All right. But my teaching methods are unconventional.
Given your survival rate, I would be concerned if they weren't.
First lesson starts tomorrow. Bring comfortable clothes and a willingness to fail spectacularly.
What will we be doing?
Watching ancient Earth entertainment media about survival situations, and then discussing why the humans always do the opposite of what makes sense and somehow live anyway.
Her ear tufts twitched. That's not what I expected.
Lesson 0. Expect the unexpected. Or better yet, don't expect anything and just roll with whatever insanity the universe throws at you.
Is that how humans approach life?
Pretty much. We call it winging it.
That explains so much about your species.
Yeah, we're pretty much held together by determination and caffeine. Speaking of which, you know any place on this station that serves decent coffee? Real coffee, not the synthesized swill?
Deck 9. There's a human-run establishment called Rocket Fuel. The owner claims his coffee can wake the dead and strip paint from bulkheads.
Perfect. My kind of place.
They parted ways at the next junction. Caleb made it to his dormitory, collapsed on his bed, and stared at the ceiling. Every part of him hurt. His metabolic reserves were shot. He'd nearly died at least 6 times in the last 36 hours. But 20 aliens were alive because he had been too stubborn to accept optimal solutions. Sometimes that was enough. His datapad chimed. A message from Sariel. Regarding your training offer, I've analyzed 19 different human survival scenarios. In all cases, the human response violated basic principles of risk management. I look forward to understanding why this works.
Caleb typed back. It works because we're too stupid to know it shouldn't. See you tomorrow.
Another chime, this time from Professor Glorp.
Student Caleb! I have submitted our paper proposal. Survival through stupidity. How humans weaponized inferior design. Isn't it marvelous?
That's not the title that we agreed on, Caleb typed.
No, but it's accurate. It's also much more likely to get a conference acceptance. Controversy drives citations.
Caleb gave up and tossed his datapad aside, the motion more surrender than spite. The damn thing landed face down in his cot, chirping one last notification in protest before going blessedly silent. He didn't care. Tomorrow, he'd get back to wrangling the chaos, but not tonight. Tonight, he was going to sleep. Under the flickering ceiling light the engineers kept promising to fix. No heroic insights, no brilliant comebacks, just sleep. Just one more night of doing what humans had always done best. Not outsmarting the universe, not overpowering it, but outlasting it. And if his single, supposedly inadequate heart decided to keep beating through the night, well, that would be human stubbornness at its finest. No backup organs, no redundant systems. Just one engine running on sarcasm, coffee, and the quiet conviction that falling down didn't matter nearly as much as getting back up again. Redundancy through refusal to quit. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't revolutionary, but it was something stronger. A sort of superpower only humans had. A rhythm older than any empire, any technology, any species that thought evolution was a race with a finish line. It was the pulse of a people who'd learned to build from rubble, to laugh while bleeding, to reach into the dark, not because they knew they'd survive, but because someone had to go first. Tomorrow could bring failure, ridicule, or another unwinnable task wrapped in alien diplomacy. But tonight, he had breath in his lungs, defiance in his bones, and one stubborn heart still beating. And that was enough to keep going into a future that, yes, was intimidating, but it was also exciting, hopeful, full of opportunity and intrigue. And sometimes, continuing on despite the challenges is the most human thing of all.